So today, welcome to another class. Here what we're going to talk about are bacteria. And so bacteria is another type of really small thing that can infect us, similar to a virus. Except remember, a virus injects its RNA into your cell. Your body then uses the RNA to make more virus. That's how viruses work. And so, and viruses aren't living things. They are inert. They don't do anything except inject their RNA in there. Whereas bacteria do all kinds of different things. And so some of the questions we had, and I might split this into two different things. What kind of bacteria is this? Why do bacteria exist? And do these bacteria have names for them? And so we can start with that. So if you notice down here, these names, cocci, bacilli, spirilla. Those are the three shapes. Cocci is round, like this. Bacilli is long like a hot dog. And spirilla has a shape like this, like a snake. And so those are the three main shapes of bacteria. And so what kind of bacteria is this? These are three different types of bacteria, and each has a different shape. And so the next question, do these bacteria have names? And so we just saw that you had round, and then you had elongated, the bacilli, and then you had these that were like that. And so, if we look at naming these guys, maybe I can use some that you maybe have heard of. Lactobacillus. So it has this shape, bacillus, and then lactose is milk. So this would be milk bacteria. And you know that it's going to look like this. And so you know that your lactobacillus in your yogurt is going to be shaped like a long hot dog. And so if you have two of these coccus, if you had two of them, then that would be a di. And so like diplo. If they're in a long chain, sometimes they're in a long chain, we'll call that has a strepto. So strepto is a long chain. So streptococcus is a long chain of these guys. Make sense? And that's what strep throat is. If the cells remain in clusters, and all the different bacteria have different kind of rules that they live by. And so some of them are in long chains, some of them there's only two, and some of them, I should have done it in different colors, but some of them stay in these different groups. And that is a staph. Staphylo. That means groups. So Staphylococcus, that's a staph infection like what you get in your hand. And so a Staphylococcus infection is a bunch of coccus bacteria that are grouped together. Streptococcus would be a long chain. Diplococcus would be something that occurs in pairs. So, the shape of the bacteria, one of these three shapes right here, 1, 2, 3, and how the bacteria is grouped together can be that can be a basis for naming a bacteria. So Streptococcus, Diplococcus, Staphylococcus. And so those are all examples of using, the description as well as the description of the shape as well as how they're clustered to name something. So why do they exist? Well, if we have a bacteria here, let me draw a bacteria. If you remember, and we talked about this, the bacteria will have DNA or RNA as its genetic material. Then they're going to have a ribosome that makes proteins like enzymes. Lactic acid is an example of that. They're also going to have a place for energy to happen, the mitochondria. They're also going to have a need for food to come in and waste to come out. And so if they have food that they can absorb, then they're going to use that food for their energy, and they're going to also use that food for building materials so they can build things within the ribosome. And so bacteria exist because they're just taking advantage of a food situation. So why do they exist? They're taking advantage of where energy / food is available. So these little bacteria guys, they are little organisms. And so, like I said, they have the cell membrane, but then they can also kind of be semi-dried out, and so they're pretty tough little guys. And so they can dry out, and then somebody might cough on their hand or get snot on their hand and then touch a doorknob, then you pick up the doorknob, and then you eat some French fries, and you get the bacteria now in your mouth, and then it goes down into your gut. I mean, down into your throat, and then it can end up, you know, in your bronchial tubes and can cause pneumonia. And so pneumonia, pneumonia is anything that affects your lungs. And so you can have chemical pneumonia, you can have viral pneumonia, you can also have bacteria-based pneumonia. So pneumonia is anything that affects your lungs. I had chemical pneumonia one time. I inhaled a bunch of smoke from one of those starter logs that has a bunch of glue in it, and so I had a chemical, my body didn't like it, and it treated it like a bacteria infection. I got a fever, my lungs were swollen, I was coughing up stuff, it was miserable. So, but bacteria, if you get it in your lungs, about 24, one of the questions was how long? 24 to 48 hours from exposure to your initial symptoms showing up. And so 24 to 48 hours, that bacteria can start to give you symptoms like coughing, fever, achiness, because your body's reacting to the bacteria in the same way that it does a virus. It's a foreign particle, and so it's going to do all those things. It's going to have a fever and do all those symptoms. So it's sometimes hard to differentiate if it's a viral pneumonia or a bacteria pneumonia. But you could have people cough up some of the phlegm from their lungs, and then you could grow this out on a petri dish. And the bacteria that causes this, and let me write it down. So the bacteria is called Streptococcus pneumonia. And so you automatically should see that it's going to be round because it's coccus right here. And then the second thing is it's strepto, so it's a long chain. And so if you had someone cough up junk from their lungs, and then remember bacteria divide, so you could put it in a broth and have it divide, and then if you looked at it under a microscope, it would look like a bunch of little, strepto chain. Similar way, just a little bit gross, but if your dog is sick, a lot of times they'll do what's called a fecal loop. And what they'll do with that is they stick a little like Q-tip up your dog's butt, and then they'll smear that whatever comes out on a slide, and then they'll look at it under a microscope. And what they're trying to do is see what the shape is, see what the shape and the grouping is of the types of bacteria. And there's only 3 different shapes, so it's not that fancy of stuff to do. And so for the questions, what ways can you get pneumonia? Virus, chemical, bacteria. What's pneumonia and how does bacteria trigger it? Well, Streptococcus pneumonia is the bacteria. How long does it take to know you have pneumonia? 24 to 48 hours after exposure. For bacteria, the chemical can be instant. You know, if you inhaled some kind of terrible aerosol, you could immediately go into an immune response. And so that could be almost immediate. So that is all for today.